Kerry journey. Still south I went, and west, and south again, from Glenamaddy, from the morning to the night. And far from cities and the sights of men, lived with the sunshine and the moon's delight. I knew the stars, the flowers, the birds, the grey and wintry sides of many glens, and did but half remember human words in converse with the mountains, moors and fens.
And we're in the parish of Lixna now, so
Close it.
we can see the remains of the old church. That will be the second church. The church of St. Trillic was there before that, of whom Desert takes its name of the hermitage of St. Trillic. So again, here. Good morning, John Malachy Raftery from Glenamaddy, and you're welcome to Dysart Graveyard in the parish of Lixna in County Kerry, which is here on the banks of the lovely River Feel. Dysart is the ancient heritage of St. Trillic, and indeed the church remains that we are looking at would be a slightly later church, which probably dates from the 8th or 9th century up to the very early 14th century. The Monk's Roadway, which came from the Abbey down at Ratu, passed very close to us here, and apparently it did cross the river through Coolagown and went on to another monastic site, Kil-Aha-Crim, or the Church of the Crooked Ford. Now, that old roadway was pointed out by none other than the late Thomas Carmody of Ennismore in 1944 and the late Mick Purtle. But no trace of that road exists at this moment in time, because that road was replaced by the new road which was made in Coolagown and Bonnacollig in 1911. And again, the other thing about it was that when the monks were making their escape during penal times, they would have come on this way, and they lived in a safe house which was part of the Ennismore house, which was up here very close to us. Now, when the four monks that were living there, they called their little house St. Peter and Paul's, which would indicate that they certainly came from Ratu. We can see the tombstone of the Knight of Kerry, because the Knights of Kerry lived up here across in Ennismore. That's where the earlier Knights of Kerry are buried. Later, their relatives and their in-laws, the Hewsons, are buried beneath the yew trees. You have a good sprinkling of both religions buried in this graveyard. And the people from across the river, both from Ennismore and Gortnaminch, and somebody maybe from Bonnacollig, their funerals would have been brought across the river by boat, and they would have been buried here, because we didn't have any bridge in Finuig until 1911. So you're in a very historic spot. It's a very peaceful spot on the banks of the River Feel.
Tim. Dysart Graveyard, near the banks of the Feel. When we look upon the tombs of the great, emotions of envy die in us. When we read the epitaphs of the beautiful, every inordinate desire goes out. When we meet parents' grief on a tombstone, our hearts melt with compassion. When we see tombs of the parents themselves, we ponder the vanity of grieving for those whom we must quickly follow. When we see kings laying by those who depose them, rival wits placed side by side, and holy men that divided the world with their disputes, we reflect on the little factions of mankind. When we read the dates on tombs, some yesterday, some 600 years ago, we consider that great day when we will all be contemporaries and make our appearance together.
We're here on the banks of the River Feel at Dysart. The River Feel has three main tributaries. One of them, actually, the River Gailey, which is flowing just to the north of us, joins it here at Coolagown at a place called the Island. The River Brick, which is slightly west of us, joins it below at the end of the Dysart marshes. And the River Smearla, which is another one big tributary of the River Feel, joins it above in Lower Bunnyara. It was at this spot in 1932, with the clearing of the church hall here. The church hall was what they called the fishing hall that was here. And at this very spot where the church hall is, actually, there were 6 or 8 dugout canoes. They had to be pulled up out of the sludge in the river, and they were up on the bank there for a bit. Apparently, the National Museum did come down and pick the best one, and the rest of them were left to rot. Incidentally as well, there was one other important thing. Prior to the doing of the brick and cassion drainage, there did a very rare plant grow from the mouth of the cassion roughly to here at Coolagown. That little plant was known as Scirpus nanus. It was a very, very small rush, and it grew profusely there. The only other place it was growing actually in this country was out at the mouth of the Avoca River in the east coast. Naturally, the river is very wide here, and again, at a very minimum, it could be low water, it could be probably 3 meters deep. Then again, when you have a spring tide, you could add another 4 to 5 meters, which meant that there is a massive quantity of water. Now, when the brick and cassion drainage came in the 1950s, and the drainage had to be done due to the damage caused by the awful floods, especially the floods of June 1926, November 1941, and August 1946, which caused total chaos and a whole loss of food for cattle as well. But again, the cassion drainage was started. It was aided by what was known as the Marshall Aid Plan for the recovery of Europe. But it did do an immense job of drainage, and they built up the banks, and it relieved people from the awful floods, which had been so much part of the century prior to that. The other thing as well, when St. Trilloch, the wanderer, when he came here to Dysart, he came in a little fishing raft, and apparently there was some sort of a place that he was able to pull in his boat, and in MacFibrish's genealogy of Irish saints, it is described as port aforesail. But the other thing was when St. Trilloch's brothers came in search of him, there was a fisherman fishing locally. So that goes to say that even back in the late 500s, there was somebody fishing on this river with a boat and net. The boat they would have been using would have been a dugout canoe. And again, thankfully today, we can see right behind my bank, there are people boat fishing still today with traditional boat fishing.
I love the feel. I love the feel as I recall the day when first I parted from its lovely shore. O'er oceans wide with throbbing hearts I pray that I might see its soft green banks once more. I love the feel and its entrancing winds through Listowel's sweet and lovely vale. At every curve its flowing pathway finds enchanted spots from out some fairy tale. I love the feel when flowers bloom again, and when in fancy through the glens I roam. In childhood days, oh, I was happy then, now fondest memories ever call me home. I love the feel at night and noon and morn, at every hour, from rise to ebb of tide. Its verdant banks the trees and woods adorn, where lonely cot and stately mansion hide. Feel bank bloom. Flood embalmed for months, then little by little, as water's level retreats down to a bedded trickle, these sloping banks take the floor in flower, making quite a stir, accents wind-powered. Patient beneath ripples so short since, biding time there, harbouring in roots their tints to come, planning their appearance to perfection, as overhead a sun slings its setting reflection. Now, true to the cues of light and its heat, inches and feet extend, and bending stalks compete and meet each other, face to petalled face, each zealously guarding its appointed place. In the jealous scheme of things lacustrine, spurting towards well-signed finishing line of seed, regeneration uppermost on each mind, not far removed from ours, our highs that bind. The raised banks of the river and the adjoining open spaces provide an ideal habitat for a wide variety of wild flowers. This beautiful display is easily accessible to and within easy reach of the passerby. Sedge. Sedge with meadow scent mingling over the flow of sustainable spring energy. Silent, always on the go, betokening the inaudible tick of the earth. Hedge with sedge scent, silent, always on the grow, mingling over fields flow,